Just before dawn on October 9, 2023, Texas troops prepared for a daring mission. Few had undertaken similar operations before. Governor Greg Abbott ordered them to retake Fronton, known as Cartel Island.
This land we're on right now was used by the federal government to further illegal activity.
The mission was clear: seize the island and hold it at all costs. Their captain warned of potential threats from high structures. Cartels, known for their brutality, posed a serious danger. Abbott knew the risk but pressed on. Why did Texas target Cartel Island?
Do you believe that Texas has the right?
Those are false narratives. What Texas and the United States have the right to do.
What impact does this have on the war on drugs and the U.S.-Mexico border situation? These questions highlight the ongoing struggle against cartel influence. The drug lord fueling Chicago's overdose crisis. Just after sunrise on Chicago's west side, CBS News observed the morning rush for drugs. Brian McKnight from the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, pointed out the activities happening in broad daylight. The scene was a stark reminder of the city's ongoing drug crisis. Last year in Chicago, nearly 800 people died from drug overdoses. According to McKnight, probably 90% of these drugs are coming from Mexico. The DEA is particularly focused on a Mexican drug lord named Nemesio Cervantes, known as El Mencho. His cartel, Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, is one of the most powerful and violent drug trafficking organizations in the world. He is the #1 priority for the DEA and, frankly, for federal law enforcement in the United States, said Matthew Donahue, the DEA's top agent in Mexico. Donahue has been instrumental in uncovering dozens of drug labs operated by El Mencho in the jungles of Mexico. The CJNG is responsible for at least a third of the drugs entering the U.S. by land and sea. According to the Department of Justice, the cartel has trafficked massive quantities of prohibited substances into the United States. El Mencho has a $10 million bounty on his head. Ironically, about 30 years ago, he lived in California, where he was arrested on drug charges and eventually deported back to Mexico. It was there that he started the CJNG, which has since grown into one of the most feared criminal organizations in the world. He has an enormous amount of weapons, including RPGs and 50 caliber weapons. He basically has his own SWAT teams, Donahue explained. The cartel's arsenal is a testament to its power and the threat it poses to law enforcement and civilians alike. El Mencho's cartel has not shied away from using extreme violence to protect its empire. They have been involved in numerous high-profile incidents, including shooting down a Mexican Army helicopter, which resulted in the deaths of 6 soldiers and a public hanging last summer. The violence perpetrated by the CJNG has contributed to thousands of deaths in recent years. According to statistics from the Mexican government, there are approximately 94 homicides per day in Mexico, many of which are linked to cartel violence. Back in Chicago, the drugs seized from Mexican cartels are so toxic that they require protective gear to handle. At the lab, packs of cocaine are stamped with trafficker brands, making it possible to trace their origins. More than a third of these drugs can be traced back to El Mencho's cartel. He is responsible for sending the poison that is killing innocent women and children, Donahue said. The impact of El Mencho's trafficking operations is felt across the United States. When someone's child dies from an overdose, there is a good chance that the drugs came from El Mencho's organization, Donahue noted. Last year, more than 67,000 Americans died from overdoses, a grim statistic that underscores the deadly reach of El Mencho's cartel. The DEA's efforts to combat the flow of drugs into the United States are ongoing, but the challenge is immense. The fight against drug trafficking organizations like the CJNG is a complex and dangerous battle, with far-reaching consequences for communities both in Mexico and the United States. The Texas Rangers are one of the oldest police organizations in the United States and the oldest with statewide jurisdiction in North America. They began in 1823 when Stephen F. Austin, known as the Father of Texas, formed a paramilitary group. This group was created to protect the 600 American families who had settled in Texas with an invitation from the Spanish government, which ruled Mexico, including Texas at the time. Because these troops needed to cover large areas of land, They were called Rangers. In the 1830s, the Rangers became more permanent as tensions grew between the Republic of Texas and the newly independent Mexico. The Rangers were tasked with defending the border and protecting against attacks by Native Americans. Clashes with Native Americans were more frequent than battles with Mexico. The Rangers continued their service after Texas joined the Union following the Mexican-American War. On January 28, 1861, Texas seceded from the Union. Although the Rangers did not officially participate in the Civil War, many members joined the Confederate Army, forming Terry's Texas Rangers, led by Colonel Benjamin Franklin Terry. After the Union won the war, Texas was occupied, and the Rangers were temporarily disbanded during Reconstruction. They were reorganized as the state police under the Reconstruction government. However, after Reconstruction ended in 1873, the Rangers were reconstituted. As the frontier closed, the Rangers shifted from being a paramilitary group to focusing on investigative and police work. In 1935, about a century after their founding, the Rangers became part of the newly created Texas Department of Public Safety. In this role, they serve as Texas State Bureau of Investigation, similar to the FBI. In October 2023, amid the ongoing border crisis, the Texas Rangers turned their attention to Fronton Island in the Rio Grande. This island did not exist when the Rangers were created, as the river cut a new channel between 1852 and 1926, separating this land from the mainland. This separation occurred after the Mexican-American War and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which set the Rio Grande as the border between the United States and Mexico. The channel that created the island split it from the mainland to the north, raising questions about its nationality. For decades, the status of Fronton Island was uncertain, and both countries largely avoided it. The issue was resolved in 1976 when the International Boundary and Water Commission, established in 1889 by the United States and Mexico to handle territorial issues, recognized Fronton Island as American territory. This decision aligned with a new treaty between the two countries that came into effect in 1970. Fronton Island cleared of cartel activity. Now that the Texas government has claimed control over Fronton Island, a 170-acre landmass surrounded by the Rio Grande, they are determined to maintain their hold. The island had been under cartel control for months. Images revealed armed operatives, some in body armor, moving through the area and aiding human smuggling. Other images, shared by the Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, showed cartel members using explosives to escalate intimidation tactics. In September, Texas authorities cleared Fronton Island of cartel activity as part of Operation Flat Top. On September 7, the Texas General Land Office granted DPS access, confirming the state's ownership of the land. By November 27, Operation Flat Top was completed, with DPS and others clearing the island of vegetation and leveling the land. Today, Fronton Island is considered part of Texas's Starr County. It is uninhabited, with a length of about 2 miles and covering around 160 acres. The island is largely flat, with the highest point reaching 177 feet. Due to the lack of residents, thick vegetation had grown unchecked, covering the island at the time of the raid. The island's low profile and remote location deterred government agents on both sides of the border from patrolling it, even after ownership was resolved in the 1970s. The island's potential as a haven for criminal activity became evident as early as the 1980s. On June 10, 1983, 7 convicts in a Mexican prison yard attacked a guard, took his weapon, and escaped through an open gate. They fled to Fronton Island. 3 of these men were linked to the murders of 2 Mexican federal police officers. Authorities from both sides of the border collaborated to capture the fugitives, but the dense foliage on the island made surveillance and intelligence gathering nearly impossible. Helicopter observation was ineffective. 3 fugitives were captured on June 12th after they left the island. Reports on the other 4 are scarce. Fronton Island's thick vegetation not only makes it ideal for hiding people, but also for concealing illicit cargo. The shallow Rio Grande in this area is relatively easy to cross compared to deeper sections. Additionally, the well-established road network near the river crossing on the Mexican side facilitates the cartel's movement of illicit goods. These factors made Fronton Island a hotspot for organized crime, with Mexican drug cartels using it as a transit point for narcotics, weapons, and human trafficking. Today, Texas is focused on keeping control of Fronton Island to prevent its use by criminal organizations. Their ongoing efforts aim to ensure that the island remains free from cartel activity. The Texas government, along with DPS and other agencies, is committed to maintaining a strong presence on the island. By doing so, they hope to deter any future criminal activity and secure the area for good. Operation Lone Star and its impact. In March 2021, Texas launched Operation Lone Star to address a sharp rise in border crossings and to combat illegal activities like drug trafficking and smuggling. The initiative began after Governor Greg Abbott declared a disaster in 53 Texas counties, which allowed him to deploy the Texas National Guard to the border. Operation Lone Star is a collaboration between the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Military Department. By March 2024, the operation had led to the apprehension of over 500,000 people, more than 40,000 criminal arrests, including 36,000 felonies, and the seizure of 469 million doses of fentanyl. However, independent investigations found that at least 2,000 of these arrests did not appear to be related to Operation Lone Star, raising questions about the accuracy of some reported figures. Despite these doubts, the operation showed some positive outcomes. From March 2021 to March 2022, illegal border crossings in Texas increased by 6.9%, a lower rate compared to Arizona's 36.3%, California's 30%, and New Mexico's 47% increases. In the spring of 2023, the Biden administration ended the COVID-19 related state of emergency, which also ended Title 42 enforcement. Title 42 had facilitated easier removal of unauthorized border crossers. In response, Governor Abbott sought assistance from other states through the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. 14 Republican-controlled states agreed to help, with Florida contributing the most personnel. In 2023, there was increased activity along Fronton Island. On September 7th, the Texas Land Commissioner, Dawn Buckingham, authorized the Department of Public Safety to patrol the island, setting the stage for a raid in October. This raid followed previous successful operations by the Texas Department of Public Safety on islands near Eagle Pass, which had provided valuable experience in controlling such areas. The Texas Rangers conducted the raid on October 9 after coordinating with Mexican law enforcement. Their goal was to take control of cartel structures on Fronton Island, which had been marked with cartel symbols. This island lies on the border between the Gulf Cartel and the Cartel del Noreste, allied with the Los Zetas cartel. The area had seen violent clashes between these cartels and law enforcement, and some buildings were damaged from gunfire. The cartels used the island's high points for strategic advantage and even fired at American law enforcement officers across the river. On September 9, 2 days after Buckingham's authorization, a group of 20 people was attacked near Fronton Island, with 3 individuals wounded. This area, part of the cartel's expanding influence, is known for its danger, as reflected in the U.S. State Department's travel warnings. Operation Lone Star aimed to restore control over this perilous region. To secure Fronton Island, the Texas Rangers executed a highly militarized operation, dressed in camouflage and armed with military-grade weapons. The mission had strict rules of engagement to avoid international incidents, allowing Rangers to fire only if fired upon first. Drones provided surveillance support for the operation. Since its inception, Operation Lone Star has faced criticism. The federal government, state officials, and migrant advocates have raised concerns about its treatment of migrants, including reports of withheld water and dangerous conditions caused by razor wire. Human Rights Watch has criticized high-speed pursuits related to the operation, linking them to fatalities. Additionally, the busing of 119,000 migrants to sanctuary cities has strained local resources, prompting requests for federal assistance and other measures from local officials. In January 2024, Texas seized control of Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, a key site for processing migrants. This action led to a standoff with federal officials, who were denied access except for emergency purposes. The Biden administration indicated it would involve the Department of Justice if access issues were not resolved. Operation Lone Star controversies. In 1983, the surveillance of the island was conducted using helicopters, but this method was less effective compared to current technologies. Today, higher resolution cameras, thermal imaging, and drones, which are harder to detect, offer a significant improvement. However, our understanding of their effectiveness is based on educated guesses rather than concrete evidence. During the operation, the Mexican Federal Police collaborated with the Rangers. Their specific role was to block access to the island from the south bank of the Rio Grande. Unfortunately, due to extensive cartel infiltration in the Mexican government and its agencies, the cartels likely received advance warning of the Rangers' plans. The Rangers were aware of this risk and aimed to achieve maximum surprise despite the circumstances. The Rangers commenced their raid at dawn to catch the cartels off guard. The operation was fraught with danger. The Rangers had to be cautious of both small arms fire from elevated positions and improvised explosive devices, IEDs. Officers were instructed not to disturb backpacks or piles of clothing, as these could be rigged with explosives. In a previous incident, law enforcement had discovered an IED among caches of rifles and ammunition. Fortunately, no cartel members were present on the island during the raid, as those who had been alerted to the operation had chosen to flee instead of fighting. Following the raid, the Rangers posed with the Texas flag to signal that they had reclaimed Fronton Island. This marked only the initial phase of the operation. The next step was for Texas to effectively occupy the island. The day after the raid, the National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety began reinforcing Fronton to prevent access from the Mexican side of the border. Once the Rangers declared the island secure, the National Guard initiated the construction of fortifications, including over 1.5 miles of razor wire. They also started clearing the island's vegetation, a move that sparked controversy. The island's plant life had turned it into an unofficial wildlife sanctuary, and environmental experts warned that removing the vegetation could lead to ecological damage. Betty Perez, a local botanist, expressed concerns that the loss of vegetation would destabilize the island, potentially causing erosion and silt buildup in the river. Despite these warnings, Texas officials proceeded with clearing the vegetation, emphasizing the necessity of securing the island. Buckingham, a spokesperson for the operation, argued that the environmental concerns were secondary to the need for border control. Although patrols continue, their effectiveness is limited by a shortage of personnel in the extensive border area. Operation Lone Star has faced legal challenges and criticism. According to CBS News Texas, 496,000 migrants have been detained for illegal entry, with 38,500 facing criminal charges. The exact number of these cases related to the detentions is unclear. Sergeant Rene Cordova stated that the operation, initiated under the governor's orders, aims to protect Texas from border security failures attributed to President Joe Biden. CBS News Texas reported increased security measures in Eagle Pass, including additional troopers, barriers, and arrests for criminal trespassing. Despite these efforts, migrants like Edwin from Guatemala continue to attempt unlawful crossings, seeking asylum. The state has installed floating barriers in the Rio Grande to deter crossings, though these barriers are currently subject to legal disputes. Critics, like America Garcia from the Eagle Pass Border Coalition, argue that the operation serves political agendas rather than addressing real issues, suggesting funds should be redirected to schools and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Cordova maintains that the operation is vital for addressing issues that impact communities across the United States. Abbott's program has transported over 100,000 migrants to Democrat-led sanctuary cities, with New York receiving the highest number. Legal battles. Governor Abbott's goal with the effort was to protect Texas's sovereignty. To achieve this, Texas constructed extensive razor wire barriers in a park to prevent illegal border crossings. The Biden administration quickly challenged this move, arguing that Border Patrol agents needed access to the park to process people who had crossed the border illegally. Initially, a lower court sided with Texas, blocking federal authorities from removing the razor wire. However, the U.S. Supreme Court later overturned this decision with a 5-4 ruling. The ruling allowed the removal of the fortifications in Eagle Pass, but did not address whether Texas could set up new barriers. Consequently, the standoff continued. Securing the border has proven to be much more challenging than capturing an uninhabited island. The raid on Fronton Island soon revealed its limitations. Drone and ground camera footage released a month after the raid showed that armed cartel members continued to patrol the border area. Although the raid removed cartels from the island, it did not significantly disrupt their illegal operations. Officials had warned that cartels would likely shift their activities to other locations. Despite this, removing Fronton Island's strategic advantages was a step in the right direction. While cartels would find alternative areas, those might not be as advantageous as Fronton Island. The border crisis is ongoing. The Texas-Mexico border stretches over 1,200 miles, making it difficult to manage illicit activities across such a vast area. Cartels can exploit this by moving their operations to less patrolled areas. Natural obstacles also complicate systematic patrols, and population centers on both sides of the border do not align perfectly. Populated areas south of the border can serve as staging points for cartels to smuggle goods and people into less monitored parts of the northern side. Cooperation with Mexican authorities in these population centers could help, but it is not guaranteed. Additionally, cartels' infiltration of Mexico's security services can alert them to any planned operations, reducing the effectiveness of such cooperation. Legal and operational challenges continue for Texas. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has warned Texas that blocking Customs and Border Protection, CBP, access to Shelby Park and Eagle Pass may be unconstitutional. DHS General Counsel Jonathan Meyer sent a letter stating that Texas must allow Border Patrol access and remove all barriers by January 14, 2024. If Texas fails to comply, the Justice Department will consider further action. The Biden administration accused the Texas National Guard of obstructing Border Patrol agents from accessing a 2.5-mile stretch of the southern border. Meyer's letter highlighted that Texas's actions disrupted federal operations and led to the deaths of migrants in the park. Texas officials, however, argued that their actions were not responsible for the deaths and claimed that Border Patrol had already been notified of the migrant deaths by the time they requested access. Despite some access being granted to a boat ramp, Texas has imposed restrictions, preventing full Border Patrol access and interfering with their operations. Meyer criticized Texas for continuing to deny full access, stating that Texas's actions conflicted with federal law and obstructed the duties of the Border Patrol. The Texas National Guard has reportedly blocked entrances through federal barriers, and despite claims of reopening Shelby Park to the public, Border Patrol remains unable to enter significant portions of the park. Fighting cartels. Despite the success of the raid on Fronton Island, the broader issue of organized crime on the U.S. southern border remains complex and ongoing. This raid was part of the larger Operation Lone Star, which aims to address the persistent challenges of border security. Evaluating whether Texas can enhance its approach, or if the increased use of drones, both in the air and on water, will be a game changer in the fight against cartels is crucial. Governor Abbott has stated that the goal of Operation Lone Star is to manage a multifaceted issue involving global migration trends. Migration is rising worldwide, driven by factors like poverty, job scarcity, political instability, and crime in countries such as Honduras and Venezuela. Individuals often resort to smugglers and cartels to reach the U.S., causing frequent shifts in smuggling routes. Victor M. Manjarres Jr., a former Border Patrol chief, emphasized that the border is more than a mere line on a map. It is an intricate ecosystem affected by both nearby and distant influences, including conditions in other countries beyond Mexico. Adam Isaacson, from the Washington Office on Latin America, noted that Mexico has recently stepped up its enforcement by detaining more migrants. However, the country is not deporting them in large numbers, and recent legal rulings restrict how long migrants can be held, leading to a practice of relocating them to areas away from the U.S. border to ease the pressure. Senate Bill 4, a new Texas immigration law allowing state police to arrest individuals suspected of illegal entry, is currently entangled in legal challenges. If it is allowed to proceed, it might temporarily reduce migrant numbers. Still, Isaacson suggests that it may only act as a temporary obstacle, as migrants may adapt to the new conditions. Data from Border Patrol show that migrant encounters decreased immediately after the end of Title 42, but increased again toward the end of 2023. This fluctuation complicates the task of assessing the impact of Border Patrol and Operation Lone Star. Correa Cabrera highlighted the challenge of attributing changes in migrant numbers to specific policies or operations. To combat the border crisis effectively, the Texas government needs to remain vigilant. Cartels continue to inflict significant harm, and while overcoming their influence may seem daunting, there is hope. Success will depend on sustained cooperation among state, federal, and Mexican authorities. Joint operations and shared intelligence could disrupt cartel activities more effectively. The use of technology is also crucial. Drones, surveillance cameras, and other advanced tools provide real-time intelligence and improve border security, enabling better monitoring of remote areas and early identification of potential threats. Public support and awareness are equally important. Texans, particularly those near the border, must recognize the significance of these operations. Community involvement in reporting suspicious activities can aid law enforcement efforts. Additionally, addressing the root causes of the border crisis, such as economic instability, violence, and corruption in Mexico, requires a comprehensive approach, including economic aid, education, and anti-corruption measures. While the raid on Fronton Island was a significant and necessary step, the battle against cartels is far from over. Continued efforts, strategic planning, and collaboration are essential for securing the border and ensuring the safety of Texans. The path ahead is challenging, but with perseverance and effective strategies, peace and security are within reach. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.